Hey girl, hey.
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 Hey girl, hey podcast, Urban Media Today. I thought to name this particular episode Republicans, am I right? I don't know why I just did that. I don't know. My son thought it was funny. I don't know if our guest, he's smiling, so.
I laughed. You want me over on that?
Lenny Mc Allister is here. And we're going to give a background on Lenny Mc Allister real quick, but I am your radio chick, Kiki Brown.
And I am the chatter chick, LaShawn Tipton.
Our millennial chick is on vacation, so we have another millennial in for her. And Miss Portia Foxx is being admitted to the room. So once she comes back in, we'll talk. Once she gets settled. Right. Yeah. I don't know what happened. And then she's sideways.
And now you're sideways.
If you're watching the video, you'll see this. This will be added to the blooper reel. It's the Hey Girl, Hey podcast on Urban Media Today. We have two guests today, reoccurring guest, Portia Foxx. She's also a radio chick for WAMA 100 here in Pittsburgh, PA. Hey, Portia.
Hello. I'm a little mess right now.
Hello. Hello. And we have Lenny Mc Allister, who is a Republican strategist, who was the party's candidate for a Pennsylvania congressional seat in 2016. He spoke on this past RNC, and we're going to definitely get into detail. When I wanted to talk about the Democratic National Convention and the Republican National Convention, I was like, we always talk on a Democratic spectrum, like not a spectrum, but just kind of like on a level, like we all kind of agree on some things. And then when we talk about the Republican Party, it's just so confusing, and then it gets frustrating. And I was like, there should be someone that can answer our questions, and someone we can trust their answers, someone that we have a relationship with, someone we can also call friend, because not all Republicans are mean or bad, which is what I was told growing up. So Lenny Mc Allister, thank you so much for being here today.
Well, Kiki, thanks for having me. The thing that was disappointing, though, is, it tells you where Portia is expecting this conversation to go, because she started out going sideways, right? So we got to let her know that this conversation's not going to go sideways. She can be safe here, and we're good.
It's a safe space.
It's definitely a safe space. This is, and I was telling LaShawn off mic, I said, I have so many questions, because as a little girl, I was told by my mom, and I actually confronted her the other day, like, Mom, you messed me up. She was just like, Republicans are for rich people, Democrats are for poor people. And that was it. That was it. There was no other, there was no third, there was no nothing. And growing up, that's what I dealt with. And I didn't understand until later. I became a homeowner, and of course, becoming a mother and paying taxes and owning a business. And then I got more involved in politics. And so I'm glad that you're here so that you can answer a lot of questions and even misconceptions, and maybe tell us what the hell is going on, and so that we know not to think that every Republican is represented by this voice, that agenda, hopefully.
Well, I'm down for that. And I mean, the bottom line is, we have to have a voice out there for our people at all times. We have to have people that are advocating for what we need for our communities at all times, regardless of who's in office. And that's not just in Washington, D.C. That's whether that's here in Pittsburgh, when you talk about Harrisburg, PA, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, or local government as well, depending on what town you're in. So I'm very, very glad to do it.
Okay. Well, Lenny is made aware that our first half, we're going to just kind of wrap up the top stories. And the top two stories, well, one was Women's Equality Day. And then the other was the protest with the sports teams. LaShawn is our chatter chick. She is the woman of a certain age. And this is the woman who is always booked and busy.
Pretty much.
So we kind of catch her up every week. But no, sometimes she surprises us and be like, oh no, that's not what we said.
She be knowing.
She be knowing.
Hello.
She said, don't play me. She said, don't do LaShawn. Don't do it like that.
It's been 100 years since the 1920 adoption of the 19th Amendment of the United States Constitution, prohibiting the states and the federal government from denying the right to vote to citizens of the U.S. on the basis of sex. And I must confess and admit that I've been ignorant even to this event for so long, again, since becoming an adult, did not know about this, and that's sad. Maybe joining a sorority that has a lot of HBCU grads, understanding it on that level, but the celebration was amazing. I did not know about statues with men in parks. I didn't know. You know, you walk past the park and you see a statue and it's like, who's that? I don't know who that is. I'm so ignorant.
Right.
Anybody else have an effect with this celebration earlier this week?
With the Susan B. Anthony and the woman's
Yeah.
Suffrage movement. Is that what they're
I like
separate?
I love it. I love the symbolism behind it, but you have the history and some conspiracy that said that Susan B. Anthony wasn't that nice to Ida B. Wells.
Mm-hmm.
And
I wasn't there. I don't know.
I wasn't there, you know, but according, you know, there's always a deeper story behind something that always happens. And honestly, there was a separation between the Black women's movement and the women's movement at some point in time, because Black women recognized that the white women weren't necessarily, it wasn't for all. It was more so, we want to take first dibs and we going to see what we can do for you. Okay. So, I mean, it's a marred situation, but in all honesty, there's always a solution that came about it. So it's still enough to be celebrated, no matter what happened underneath. You kind of gotta recognize that without any victory, there is definitely some backstabbing, there's some rivalry and things of that nature. So I don't read into conspiracies that much whenever it comes to those type of agendas. Like, oh, well, I'm not going to not like Susan B. Anthony for what she did because of what she did to my homie Ada. I didn't know her, you know. So it's like, I like it, and I'm glad that it is happening in Central Park, and it needs to happen more because there really aren't any women memorials anywhere. So I don't care what the backstory is. I'm glad that it's there.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing about statues with women, I mean, we haven't seen that, so we're not accustomed to walking somewhere and say, oh, there's a statue of a woman. So we're so used to
the truth.
Yeah, we're so used to not seeing that it's nothing for us to see it. But this is the thing here. I think today, Black women, we still have to fight. Like, the fight is still there for us. Although they're doing the march and they're talking about equality, the equality still hasn't came for us. I've said it, and I've said it on our shows. I think the Black woman is the most disrespected woman. I think so. I think, like,
disrespectful or disrespected?
Disrespected. The most disrespected woman. And the reason I say this is because I'm just going to hit on this lightly and then we can just move on. But this is the reason why I say this. Even when it came to, like, the women that accused Harvey Weinstein of rape, they were white women, and it was a big deal. But for so long, Black women had been saying that, you know, she was raped, this happened to her, and it was all, we heard things, well, she had on this clothing, she shouldn't have wore this, she shouldn't have did this. And no one would think that a Black woman get raped because a Black woman can handle it. She can take, you know what I mean? So I'm glad for the march. I'm happy for the march. I'm glad that, you know, we're getting our equality, but we still got a ways to go when it comes to Black women, I feel.
And it's interesting that you all would bring this up, because it always, anytime there's these types of celebrations in America, it always highlights the difference between what it's like to be one type of American and then what it's like to be Black in America. And to all of you ladies' points, I mean, there's so many things that Black women have to go through and endure that we're just, even in 2020, finally starting to talk about out in the open on a regular basis. More often than not, things in regards to discrimination when it comes to the workforce, when it comes to treatment on the street, when it comes to gender dynamics, even when it comes to things when you talk about a women's movement, it always seems to be the suburban white mom that is extolled in that.
Right.
And finally in 2020, we're talking about Black women and finally starting to really talk about this is a different level of sexism and racism that Black women have to go through. I mean, heck, everything from the way you all wear your hair at work, it's still legal in many states across the country for an employer to come up and say, I don't like your hair like that.
Yeah.
Get rid of it. or there's going to be consequences.
Right.
In 2020, we have 320 plus million people in the United States of America. How many languages are spoken in households across this country? And yet a Black woman wearing her hair naturally, even as you're celebrating 100 years of women's suffrage, when she goes back to the office as an attorney, can still face repercussions for wearing her hair in its natural state.
Absolutely.
Just the dichotomy of that shows how much further we have to go along as an American society.
Exactly. Exactly.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead,
I say that we have made some strides. I mean, we had a woman Secretary of Defense, correct? Did we have a secretary?
Yes. Secretary.
Right?
Yeah.
We have a woman that is running for vice president, a Black woman. We have a Speaker of the House. She's a woman. I mean, not many of the women in power are African American, but I will applaud just so many. So how far we've gone. We've gotten so far from that 100 years. So I am proud. We do have a lot more work to do, though. I will say that. And I don't even know where does it start? Does it start with changing government, starting new laws? Does it start with us continuing to fight and marching and building statues? Like, how, making a statue is one thing, but some of the things still have to change. And how does that happen? Does that happen with changing the laws?
I honestly don't feel like, I honestly don't feel like that would happen without a woman being president, or without a woman being a vice president, or taking a higher seat, and is involved in that type of activity and making sure those laws and imposing those and getting people on board with those type of things, because there's a lot of advocacy for it. I think every first lady has a girls initiative or a young ladies initiative, whatever they come through. They have a kids initiative. I believe Michelle Obama had the fresh food initiative with the lunches. And there was a girl empowerment situation along with Let's Play the Kids situation too. So when everything was all inclusive,
we have to say we have Be Best. Be best.
Oh my God.
With the bullying. Go ahead. I'm just saying.
Be best. Be best, y'all. Be best.
Be best. Be best.
Be nice.
Be nice. I'm not what?
Not you. I'm talking about the women of a certain age.
Be best.
Lenny, do you want to jump in here before we?
Well,
go ahead, Lenny. Be best.
Listen to you now, LaShawn. Here's the thing, right? You gotta understand that even when these first ladies have had these initiatives, you're also kind of seen as the second fiddle just by the very nature of you are partnered with the president of the United States. So when it goes back to Portia's point, some of these folks have to be in the head honcho position. When you have a woman governor, let's say we have an African-American woman that's governor of, let's say, New York, coming up soon when Andrew Cuomo moves. Or we have a DC mayor, for example, that's an African-American woman. When you start having people continue to move up the chain of political success, that's where that advocacy comes from, and you can start seeing those changes. And it goes to your point, Kiki. Maybe we need to start seeing more statues where young girls 7, 8, 9 can see themselves there. And then from there, it goes back to both sides, both genders talking about this in society, so that when a 13-year-old girl starts wondering, can she be a general? Can she be president of the United States? Can she be the head of the bank? We don't act like it's a big deal when she has that aspiration. Part of the issue is when we act like it's a big deal, that in her mind, it's like, well, I got so much more to overcome because I'm not supposed to be able to do this as a woman. That's got to be a ridiculous notion moving forward. Our young girls come to us at 15 years old and say, I want to be president by the time I'm 50. We got to kind of shrug our shoulders and be like, okay, well, that means you got to do this, 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 and then send her on her way and help her out versus making it seem as though she's doing something fantastic. She has the same brain power and the same God-given talents that a boy her age might have.
Exactly.
We have to be able to project that and live that as a reality in our society, because too often we make it seem as though it's a big deal. We have to shift that, and that's a cultural shift that all of us have to make, including, and I hate to say this, including in African-American homes where we purport a lot of misogyny, but we don't like talking about it.
Right.
It is.
That's true.
I think it's sad whenever in this day and age, we're celebrating being the first. Being the first Black on my job, working at the front desk of a hotel. Like, the first? What are you talking about? This is a job. You know,
Or the
we're
first to be
celebrating
the first graduate
first.
in my family, the first college graduate.
But those are
First
things to be
doctor.
celebrated. Those are things to
Yeah.
be celebrated within the family. But when we're working jobs, when we're working with people that are supposed to be our equal, and we're celebrating first on the job as being Blacks, that's not cool.
That's Kamala's
society that's
headline.
Screwed up.
Yeah.
That's Kamala's
screwed up.
headline. Everybody's Kamala is, she's the first Black nominee, the first Black VP, woman VP, like the first, other than Miss Chisholm. So it's just like, and she didn't get as far as her. She just ran a race, but at the same time, and that was notable, and that's notable, and that's admirable. And but how many women are able to say that to little girls, to say, oh, she ran for how many years ago? In that time, how many women have been escorted and trained and groomed for those positions?
We bought the hype. But we were in on that. We said, well, you know, your brother, he can be the president, but you can be his secretary.
I have to interject here. This is the same generation. This is the same family members that celebrate a Black man or a Black woman coming out of prison. We'll throw you a barbecue and celebrate that versus somebody that's, we're going to graduate. Yeah, you graduated high school. Yeah, you graduated college, but it's not, the message is still the opposite. It's not, we're praising the wrong thing, and we're telling our kids.
Yeah, not in my family.
Well, no,
you're coming out of jail.
But not every family.
Get you a job, right? You won't have the cookout.
Not every family, but it does happen. Oh man, you all joke college. Instead of praising that child's accomplishments, we down them, and so the conversation does have to start at home, and we need to start encouraging our kids to read books. And
we got that in our families. I mean, everybody has that in their families.
Can I interject? So what I will say, as far as speaking for the millennials, I will say that I'm not a woman of a certain age, but I'm also not as young as I look. A lot of my parents,
you don't look that young.
Don't play me.
Don't look that.
Don't do me like that.
No, I'm sorry, my sister. Yes, you
did. You see that? Wait a minute.
Yes, sis. No, my sister. I will never. Only joking. People don't think I put my sister. I don't do that.
I love.
I'm only joking.
So
love you.
Because I know. I love you because you do that. So that's why I'm like, and I like to have fun like that. I'm sorry. I did it to Kiki. Sorry. Kiki does it to you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Come on. Because we got other things, and plus we got to talk to Lenny about.
So the things that I was saying, as far as what Kiki was saying, as far as we start, and the thing about my generation, even if they were pregnant, had a teen pregnancy, they absolutely are celebrating their kids going further than them.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of, even with my generation too, even if they had a kid early, that didn't stop. I've seen so many. There's so, like, everybody who I know who had a kid early, that did not stop them. Every single last one of them, even if they had multiple, but they do celebrate their children. I do see a lot of extra YZ, but for the most part, as a whole, there's a lot of encouraging to finish because they don't want them to be like them, and they swear that they're not going to be like them. There's a lot of fathers involved.
I love that.
There's a ton of fathers involved. There's so many fathers involved.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my! Like, I'm just, and it makes me so happy. So it's starting. Just to let you know that this is starting. So we just have to be a community and make sure that we all encourage them. And
the conversation has to change as well, and the encouragement must continue. Lenny brought up a good point, just saying about how when we see these statues that 12 to 15-year-old girls can see something and see that as a motivation and see that as an inspiration. Just switching gears real quick with the Black Lives Matter and the protests and the ongoing unrest in our neighborhoods, in our communities, primarily Black communities, where an unarmed Black man once again shot by a police officer 7 times, close range, this reason for that, and there's reason for that. It got so serious that a lot of people who make a lot of money made some decisions that could have taken the bag, that could have taken their bag. And they said, I'm not playing until we have a conversation. And I mean, NBA NFL stopped the practices. Major League Baseball walked off the field. Even Naomi Osaka, she didn't want to. She didn't continue her tournament. They have all since returned, and I know that the playoffs will resume Saturday. So, but just that much, and it was that much talk. Kenny Smith walked off the set on TNT, and it was just like, whoa, this was big. This was major. It's something for us here in our homes to talk about. But then when you watch the political advertisements, and even at the RNC, and just the mention or the lack of mention, the compassion and the lack of compassion, to hear that is exhausting. It's hurtful, and something needs to be done. And just as our guest here, someone that's on a political platform, you know, I don't even know what to ask. I don't even know what to say. This is so major for our people that it's beyond words. So what are your comments on everything that's happened this week?
Well, Kiki, number one, I mean, let's think about it. One of the widest sports in North America, the NHL, they stopped their
yes. Mm-hmm.
So that says that this is something that's transformative, if you will, in that, quite honestly, a different generation of people are used to looking at the uniforms and not realizing the age of the people wearing the uniforms.
Right.
So when you start talking about 19 to 40-year-olds, they view race completely differently than older Gen Xers, baby boomers, and they're even that generation's even older than them that's still hanging around and voting. There's a disconnect in America. And when Kiki, you brought up the point that it wasn't mentioned a whole lot, if at all, at the RNC. They mentioned it a little bit more in regards to Jacob Blake's name on Thursday night than they did the previous 3 nights, but still not much. Still not much. And when you take that in consideration, that they're not doing that, and they're playing the law and order mantra, if you will. And as I told Vice President Pence previously when he was here in Pittsburgh in June, it's not just about law and order. It's about constitutional law and order. It's about people feeling as though the Constitution provides them stability as African-American citizens just as much as it will be for white citizens. And when you're not talking about that, it indicates a lack of connectivity to those portions of America. I would say a big reason why they didn't say anything over the course of the convention by and large is because they can't relate, they don't connect, they don't understand. Now, honestly, I feel as though that's part of my role in all this. How can I talk to all these different communities that are not saying the same thing? In some instances, they're talking past each other, and start bringing about not just the necessary conversations with others like me, but also bring about the necessary changes in law so that you can have that constitutional law and order where there is true equality on the books and in practice on the streets. Right now, because we're not having robust conversations where we're talking with each other and hearing each other, what we're facing is just more frustration on both sides. And unfortunately, it continues to escalate all throughout 2020 at a time where we have a pandemic, at a time where we still have 12 million jobs lost since March, and at a time when we don't know how our kids are going to even go to school, let alone we're going to work and they're going to go to school and we're going to get back to normal.
Anyone else want to comment?
I just think this is a great conversation to have. And last night when I watched the RNC,
now I feel bad.
Yeah, I watched
it. And she gave us a hard time.
I watched it.
You didn't even watch it, okay?
Yeah, well, you know, I watched all of the other ones as well. But it's just always been me, you know. I want to keep the knowledge. But when I watched it the other night, I thought it's, you know, when you skim over a situation, when you don't mention them and you skim over them, it's like you negate the whole fact that it happened. Yeah. And the more and more I watch it, I start to boil up inside. I watched it because it was on. There's two different newses. There's two different news things. There's Fox, and there's everybody else, right? Because Fox, I'm sorry, I've watched Fox, and I'm like, how did you get that out of that? And I try to be objective. I try to be subjective. I'm like, how did you get that from there? So I watched the RNC on Fox.
Wow.
You know,
I thought you was
that's
gonna say why.
woo.
No, I just said, well, because she challenged herself. I watched it on
You
NBC.
you have to
I watched
because
it on
you want to
NBC.
get an understanding of other people.
Mhm.
Like whenever when everybody says there's Democrats and Republicans,
Mhm.
I see people outside of the party, and I want people to see each other outside of the party. I want them to be about the people and not the party. That's
Yeah.
important to me. And I think as some people are not going to disclose to you that they're Republicans, but even if you are on the inside and you can talk to somebody like the president and tell him like when you talked to Pence, Lenny, you told him how you conveyed to him the
Yes.
feelings. He wouldn't have heard that from he wouldn't have heard that from a Democrat.
No.
Instantly, when a Democrat would have came up to him or said or addressed him, "Oh, I'm a Democrat, and this is the way Democrats feel," he's not going to receive
Correct.
that. We
Right.
need
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. When
so
you have big names like yourself talking to Vice President Mike Pence, and you have big names like LeBron James, and you have big names like Ben Roethlisberger, or you have some of the other big name celebrities, their names escape me right now, and they're making this noise because they're using their platforms. It seems like that's just as far as it goes, because once it hits that podium, we're all getting the same information. To me, on my level of understanding,
but
we're
people
all
get it
getting the
differently.
same information. And so when it reaches the higher office, I don't understand. And we could talk more about the RNC and the differences between Republican and Democrat, but just with this particular story is talking about the sports teams taking a knee per se.
I think that was
in
lovely.
protest. I
I think
thought it
that
was
was
commendable. I loved it.
awesome.
Why is the
Mhm.
message different once it gets to a certain level of government? Because it's like we all get the same
It depends on
information.
who you're hearing it from. Because I saw an interview with what's his name, Eric Kushner. Is that the president's
Jared
son?
Kushner.
Jared
Jared.
Kushner.
And
She
Jared
called him
said,
Eric. No,
"Yeah,
that's
I don't
the
know.
son.
Yeah,
That's
sorry.
okay.
One of them. She said
Yeah.
one of them.
Why? His son-in-law." But you know
His
what he
son-in-law.
said? His thing was he put it as if they have enough money to take the day off.
They're lucky to be able to take the day
They're
off.
lucky to be able to take the day off. It wasn't about taking the day off. Then again, you swept over the situation
But
by
it's the
saying
same
they're
message with the
lucky.
taking the knee when it was offending the
Of
military. It had nothing to do with the
it had
military.
nothing to do.
When
But
it
when
wasn't
you
offending the military were the ones that also it was a military veteran that went to Colin Kaepernick and said, "Hey, this is a way of honoring the flag without disrespecting it." Because if you remember, he initially just wouldn't stand up.
Right.
Right.
yes,
And he said, "Well, I don't want to disrespect the flag. I don't want to disrespect veterans. What do I do?" And that's when it was
take a
said,
knee.
"You take a knee." So,
I don't
but
understand.
LaShawn, you're bringing up very good points, but it goes back.
Mhm.
I want to kind of blend what Kiki was asking and what you brought up, LaShawn. People, even if they don't hear, and you have people extolling or advancing a certain position and saying certain things. After that, though, it goes back to what's the effort behind the scene. And I just saw something on social media recently that if this is true, this could be a very big game changer for November. That apparently a lot of the NBA arenas are going to become polling places.
Right.
There's not
Wow.
going to be these hours of waiting lines. Well, if they didn't play this week earlier to leverage that point to get to that point in time to make sure that every American eligible to vote that wants to vote on election day has an opportunity to vote without standing in line for 12 hours and possibly risking their health, not just because of COVID, but because it's
Right.
winter time.
Mhm.
Right,
That
right.
alone, I mean, there's something to be said
Almost
about that.
November.
I can tell you the work that I do. Yes, I had my conversation with Vice President Pence, and I've had my conversations with others throughout administrations, both in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and Washington, D.C. But I also have to do the work to look at what laws need to be changed. How do we go after proper police reform? How do we go after proper education reform? How do we go about getting people back to work during the pandemic and getting back to work safely? If you're just saying something, it's a nice soundbite. And something to commend the NBA players with and the others that took the form of protest throughout this past week is they're also putting things into motion, getting money into the movement, looking at reform and laws, making sure that it doesn't just hit the podium, Kiki. It also goes to the legislature. It also goes to Congress. People start writing proposals. We start moving things through the legislative process, and we get laws on the books that will bring about that constitutional law and order, that greater sense and deeper, truer sense of equality.
So it is making, so their attempt to send a message by not playing in protest, it did send a message, and it got the wheels going, and it got the conversation started. And so now it still needs to push and needs to be continued. And
of course,
we need to continue to make some noise so that something, these things can change. We're going to take a quick break because I have questions. Portia has questions. I think LaShawn has questions to Lenny Mc Allister. Lenny Mc Allister, LaShawn and I, we always talk about our top 5 that we should have in our pocket. LaShawn, number 1, says Jesus, right? Right. And then we need to have a police officer.
Jesus.
But what? Yes. Okay. Police officer, or you have shouts to Elizabeth, who's with the Citizen Review Board. And then you have a lawyer.
A lawyer.
Shouts to Lauren. And who else was, now we have a Republican. And then who else are we supposed to have?
A pastor.
A pastor. All right. Can you imagine all them walking into a bar?
I was going to say it sounds like a bad joke. That's where I was going.
Sounds like a bad joke.
Jesus ain't walking in the bar.
He didn't go in a bar.
Jesus go in the bar. He took people in the bar.
Lord Jesus. All right.
Hey.
We're going to take a quick break. We are here with Lenny Mc Allister, a Republican strategist, but he's going to talk more about what he does and why he chooses to do what he does, and hopefully break some misconceptions. He's also a political commentator. So he's here. He's our good friend of the show, and we're going to ask some questions and get some answers and learn a little bit more. So this is the Republicans, Am I Right? Episode of the Hey Girl Hey podcast on Urban Media today. Hold on.